Hello and welcome to the Sunday Guardian show by Joyeeta Basu. Viewers, this is being recorded exactly a week after the blast in Delhi's Red Fort. And ever since we have seen constant investigation going on, a lot of revelations coming out. It seems that it was the handiwork of a bigger group, much bigger group, which is spread all over the country. Explosives were recovered, and it's being said that it could have been a suicide bomber. Doctors, it seems that lots of doctors are involved in that, that they are the masterminds. They were the ones who were carrying it out, all of them from Kashmir, or nearly all of them. Now, to discuss this, I have got a very special guest with me, Dr. Abhinav Pandya, who is a policy analyst specializing in counterterrorism, Indian foreign policy, and AFPAC geopolitics. Now, he is an author of 3 books, including one on Jaish-e-Mohammed. He is also the founder, director, and CEO of Usanas Foundation, a security and foreign policy think tank that he operates from India. Now, welcome to the show, Abhinav.
Thank you very much, Joyeeta. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
The first question, with your expertise in this field, do you see whatever happened in Delhi being a Jaish handiwork?
Yes, the signature that's visible in this attack makes it more than evident that this is a Jaish handiwork. Well, while saying that, I would also like to mention that post abrogation of Article 370, Pakistan's intelligence agency ISI has changed its strategy and tactics in Jammu and Kashmir. So now basically they are in the direct control of militancy in J&K, and all the 3 groups, HM, Lashkar and Jaish, they are acting in coordination and tandem under the direct supervision of ISI. However, in this particular attack, it seems that Jaish has a much larger footprint. And based on their specific requirements, ISI uses a particular terror group wherever it's required. Now, Jaish's expertise is mostly in Fidayeen attacks and VBIEDs, basically vehicle-borne ID attacks. So in this case, Jaish is very evident. Secondly, all the doctors who are caught, they are from Pulwama, and Pulwama is the Jaish stronghold. Thirdly, these doctors, basically when this whole operation started, it began with this fellow called Irfan Waghi. He's a Maulvi and he's from Shopian. And basically a few youngsters were putting up some posters of Jaish. And through those youngsters, the police reached that Maulvi, and that Maulvi was found to be educated at one of the Darul Uloom. Darul Uloom is basically a Deoband entity. They call their seminaries as Darul Uloom. So he had studied in, I guess, 2 Darul Ulooms, which clearly shows that he was heavily radicalized by the Deobandi influences. Now, Jaish is a Deobandi terrorist organization. Thirdly, this lady, Dr. Shaheen, was in touch with Sadia Azhar, who is Masood Azhar's sister. And very recently, Jaish-e-Mohammed announced that they are going to start a new female wing called Muminat, the Jaish-e-Mohammed organization. So I think the signature clearly shows that it's a Jaish operation. And the last point that I want to make to this particular question is that Masood Azhar was deeply enraged and hurt because I think 12 family members had died, in Operation Sindhu, and he was seething with the rage and wanted to take revenge. So it was quite expected that Jaish would act soon, and they would plan something on a much bigger scale.
So would you say Pakistan, that is Pakistani ISI and army military in particular, are they still in control of Jaish? Because we ourselves carried a story in the Sunday report in the Sunday Guardian saying that it seems Masood Azhar has resurfaced again in Pakistan. Would you say there is some kind of Pakistan's active involvement in this?
Certainly, there is a Pakistan's, I would say, active involvement in this. And so I'll just briefly discuss about the relationship that ISI has with different terror groups. With Lashkar, it's like, it's like another offshoot of Pakistan's army. They're generally called soldiers without uniform.
So Pakistan Army, they're an offshoot of Pakistan's army, you are saying, the Lashkar.
Pakistan Army. You can call Lashkar-e-Toiba more like an offshoot of Pakistan's army. In counterterrorism circles, Lashkar-e-Toiba is known as soldiers without uniform. So Pakistan Army has a much stronger grip on Lashkar. But when it comes to Jaish, certainly there is a very strong connection. Pakistan Army controls Jaish, ISI controls Jaish, but at times Jaish can even go against the ISI and Pakistan Army if it's required for specific religious purposes. Because Jaish, unlike Lashkar, is dedicated entirely to the idea and the cause of jihad. They say that, well, our interests converge with the ISI, but at times, if they don't, we can even go against the ISI. For example, when Musharraf made a U-turn and started supporting the Americans in the global war on terror, Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Masood Azhar, his name figured in assassination attempts on Masood Azhar. And after that, he was banished by the ISI for some time. But then later on, they patched up, when Kiani came as the chief of army staff, and then they patched up, and then Jaish made a revival. So Pakistan Army has a strong working professional relationship with the Jaish-e-Mohammed. And currently, the militancy in Jammu and Kashmir and also in India is like a new, I would say, innovation. And in this phase, Pakistan Army has a much stronger grip over terrorism in J&K and also their activities in the rest of India. So this particular action is certainly under the strong, I would say, direction and influence of the IS.
Now, you talked about Pulwama being a stronghold of the Jaish. Would you
Yes.
say this Article 370 revocation, and of course, we saw the blast that, remember the Pulwama attack that happened. Now, the thing is that, is it still that influence? How much influence do these terrorist groups still have over the valley, and especially on places like Pulwama and other areas as well?
The Islamist and the jihadi terrorist groups, basically, they thrive on the ideology. So as long as the ideology which they are propagating, which they are subscribing to, gets a traction in the society, their influence reigns and it reigns supreme. So now, in the case of jihadi terrorist groups, the most interesting part and the most unfortunate part is that it's difficult to distinguish between the core tenets of the religion or the teachings of the scriptures and the ideology which they are propagating. So even if there is no terror group, there is certainly, I would say, a space for a very extremist fundamentalist ideology that can be exploited to nurture, to in fact, to sponsor terror. Now, when you have a terrorist organization which has financial resources, which has military capability, and which also has the ideology, then certainly they get a support system in Jammu and Kashmir or maybe in the other places of India also. Why should we just confine it to J&K? And we saw that these doctors, they were mostly educated professionals coming from the upper middle classes of the society. Initially, they were radicalized on the grounds of ideology only. And Jaish-e-Mohammed, it comes from the Deobandi ideology. In fact, I would say the entire South Asian jihad, with all its cohorts like the entire Harakat network, which includes the Huji, which includes Harkatul Mujahideen, Harkatul Ansar, TTP, Taliban, and Lashkar-e-Jhangvi and Sipah Sahaba, they all come from the Deobandi ideology. Jaish-e-Mohammed is the latest and the most recent terror group that follows Jaish-e-Mohammed, the Deobandi ideology. Yes, certainly after that, TTP did come, but Jaish-e-Mohammed is one of the more recent terror outfits that subscribes to Deobandi ideology. In Jammu and Kashmir and in the other parts of India, also in South Asia, Deobandi ideology has a huge following. And we recently saw that Irfan Wage, the Maulvi, who was basically involved with all these terror masterminds in Jammu and Kashmir and who was in touch with these radicalized doctors. He was a Deobandi Maulvi, and he was basically keeping a cover of de-radicalization expert. He was attending the police meetings. He was working with the JKP on de-radicalization projects. But behind the back, he was actively radicalizing these people and promoting them to join groups like Jaish-e-Mohammed and Al-Qaeda. So yes, these groups have a very strong hold in Jammu and Kashmir and in the other parts of India also. Now coming to the other group, because you mentioned all the groups, not just Jaish.
Yeah.
The other group, let's say Lashkar-e-Toiba. Lashkar-e-Toiba subscribes to the Ahle Hadith ideology. That's the Wahhabi ideology. So whatever it says, I mean, at least a major part of that, the Wahhabi, Ahle Hadith, the ideological part cannot be refuted even by the lay followers. Yes, some clerics would come and say that, well, this violence is distortion, and you can't do that. This is the wrong interpretation. But then there are certain, core ideas and principles on which there is a consensus, and they cannot be refuted. And those core ideas can always be extended to justifying and even propagating violence. And these days, these groups like Lashkar and Jaish, they are very clever. Even they have their own team of highly radicalized Maulvis who can put very strong arguments to justify what they are doing. Thirdly, this ideology also gets mixed up with the ground level conditions, like when they are approaching the young intellectuals and professional educated scholars or students, they would say that, well, the Indian state is oppressing them, and you don't have basic rights, the security forces are persecuting you. So all these typically secular and typically non-religious issues of oppression and persecution, they may not be existing in reality. Most of the time, they are perceived, they are distorted, they are concoctions, but they are conveniently used by these terror groups and these radicalized Maulvis to justify the idea of jihad as a right response to the prosecutor, to the oppressor, to the state which is perceived to be the oppressor. Now, the third group, Hizbul Mujahideen, that subscribes to Jamaat-e-Islami. Jamaat-e-Islami was the creation of Maulana Maududi, which is again an ideological movement, and it says that Sharia has to control each and every aspect of human life, be it the individual life or the social life, political life, governance, judiciary, everything. So these ideologies, or the ideological component, is the bedrock of the support base for and the influence of these terror groups. We must
No,
keep that in mind.
yeah, before I ask the next question, a quick aside. Basically, how did Pulwama become a stronghold of Jaish?
So in South Kashmir, there has been a very strong religious component since the beginning, because Shopia is a place in Pulwama which is called Babul Islam, okay? And that means, the place where all these radical ideologies, originated in Kashmir. In South Kashmir, Jamaat-e-Islami has a very strong foothold. Jamaat-e-Islami is one of the radical Islamist organizations, and South Kashmir is generally a prosperous area. People own very properly cultivable fertile lands, and that's a plain area. They're very rich, they have orchards, etc. So they have that luxury to understand and to subscribe to these radical groups and their ideology. Also, these radical groups also find South Kashmir a very fertile recruitment ground, because people being rich, they can also get a lot of money from these people in the form of donations, etc. And with that strong background of Jamaat-e-Islami, Ahle Hadith in that area, people already had that mindset. And after that, when Jaish-e-Mohammed came, with this, very strong Devbandi form of extremist fundamentalist, I would say, this ideological distortion or version of religion, then people were naturally prepared for that. And then Jaish has a very unique feature. Jaish is an expert in Fidain attacks. So when you come up with that very aggressive footprint and that USP which you carry, then it makes you certainly very attractive among the radical segments. That this is an organization which has that unique expertise in orchestrating spectacular Fidain attacks. So Jaish also carried that attraction, that charm.
Now, okay, when you're talking about the Delhi blast, I mean, there is still some quote unquote confusion in terms of whether it was a Fidain attack or whether it was accidental. Would you say it could have been a Fidain attack?
Well, normally, typically, Fidain attacks are of different types. I would say, mostly normally, even if let's say a group of terrorists come and they start shooting or engaging the security forces in a one-on-one shooting, and even in that shootout, also, if it's more than evident that they're not going to return home alive, that is also called a Fidain attack. But in another case, if you're blowing yourself up in a car or with a suicide vest, it can also be called a Fidain attack. But in the Fidain is a very, I would say, it's a jargon, it's a word that comes from the religious side. Okay, but in the counterterrorism jargon, we generally use the word suicide bomber. Now, as per my assessment, I think that this is a Fidain attack, because We know that Dr. Umar, he died in that car, and he was carrying an explosive. Now, explosive was of a different type. It was not a typical RDX or TNT. Where when it splinters, you have when it explodes, you have shells and splinters flowing across different directions. This was I guess a different kind of explosive, ammonium nitrate, and I guess they also mixed it up with TATP. And as far as it's coming, from the evidence so far, it seems that Dr. Umar realized that the other members of the racket have been caught, and reportedly he had already escaped after these posters were caught in J&K. He had already escaped. He was absconding. Because he had realized that the other members would soon be caught. So finally, when I would say, the main masterminds, Dr. Muzammil and all the other chaps were caught, he realized that now they don't have much time left. So now it's better to go ahead with whatever little he could do. So that's why, he had this, he must be having this car in his charge, and the amount of explosive that he could get hold of, and he exploded it. So I think this was deliberate, and this was a Fidayeen attack.
Um, okay, Abhinav, of course, with
And
your
it did a
connect.
significant damage. And if you look
Yes.
at it, 13 people killed, so far, and unofficial estimates are suggesting that the casualty numbers could be higher than a lot of people injured. So it can be classified as a decent Fidayeen attack. I mean, in that term, decent means I'm not praising it, but a Fidayeen attack which carries some magnitude in terms of the casualty that it could do, it could inflict. Though they had entirely different plans of orchestrating a devastating attack at multiple places. But at least, even if we completely discount what we could be prevented, even this Fidayeen attack carries weight. That too in the capital. It also has a symbolism attached to it.
Yes. Yes. Now, Abhinav, given your strong links to Kashmir and given that you keep traveling to Kashmir, now, how would you say this de-radicalization program there is working or not working? What is the
See,
mood on the ground?
I have a fundamental objection to the idea of de-radicalization. First of all, we should ask this question. I mean, what exactly are we calling radicalization? No, see, for the people who are within that framework, that system, who are going by the scriptures, for them it's not radicalization. For example, let's say if someone is practicing a Hindu faith and he organizes a Navchandi Havan at his home, or some kind of a prayer ceremony at his home, if you ask him, he wouldn't call it radicalization. He would call it as a part of his religious, paraphernalia or religious systems. Likewise, in the Islamist circles, I'm using the word Islamist, not Islamic, because generally, people distinguish between Islamic and Islamist. Islamist is more associated with these extremist and terror groups. So when they use scriptures, to justify the concept of jihad, these things are purely, a matter of religious importance for them. For them, when they are doing it, they believe that this is going to bring a lot of merit, and and they will have a place in heaven. So for them, that's not radicalization. First, secondly, when you see that all these even educated
Just if I
professionals,
can explain one
yeah.
thing to viewers, of course, we are not comparing, don't make the mistake, we are not comparing, religious rituals that are happening, any religion, even for that Islam, for that matter, and what these terrorists do.
Again, yes, I would in fact like to add something to what you said. Okay, that's why I use the word Islamist. When we differentiate between the word Islamic and Islamist, Islamic is something which is purely religious. Someone who is practicing namaz 5 times a day, and decently, honestly following the religious principles. But when someone takes that leap forward and starts using the religious concepts like jihad and the kafir and all those things, and takfiri, to justify violence and atrocities against the non-Muslims, then we use the word Islamist. So people who are living in that ecosystem do not believe that it's radicalization. First, secondly, when all these educated individuals and intellectuals are falling prey to it, that means that this is something which defies logic and reason. And if you look at the history of jihadi terrorism, you would find all kinds of educated intellectuals becoming part of jihadism. Osama bin Laden himself was an engineer, highly educated man. Umar Sheikh Said, who was released with Maulana Masood Azhar, was also a LSE student. And Burhan Wani was an engineer. His brother Manan Wani, again a terrorist, was a PhD candidate at AMU. So all these people were highly educated. Even Zakir Musa, who started Al Qaeda's local affiliate Ansar Ghazwatul Hind, was a student of Navodaya Vidyalaya. So certainly for them, it's something which has a religious appeal, which has an ideological appeal, and it is beyond logic and reason. So these de-radicalization programs are not very successful, and not just in Kashmir, across the world. If you see, the Britishers failed. Saudi had the best de-radicalization program, but then even it couldn't generate the best results. Okay. So de-radicalization programs, I think they, in terms of cost-benefit analysis, they don't end up very well, except draining the state's resources. And most of the people who are brought to these de-radicalization camps, after they get out, they again get back to the business of terrorism. And in Kashmir, these groups like Jamaat-e-Islami and nowadays Muslim Brotherhood also, they are deeply entrenched, and they are working at the grassroots, radicalizing the young population. Okay? You look at these, this crop of young doctors coming from all educated upper middle classes. They were not persecuted, but even they are falling prey to the ideologies. So this is more of an ideological issue. And then this their exposure to the pan-Islamist happenings, pan-Islamist events. What's I mean by that, I mean what's happening in the West Asia, the Israel-Palestine conflict, and the activities of Hamas, the return of Taliban in Afghanistan, also the rise to power of Al-Shara, this Julani in Syria. That also emboldens them. And these radical extremist groups, they get inspired by these happenings across the world. So exposure to the global pan-Islamist developments, either direct or through the online content, also radicalizes.
So, Abhinav, how serious is the situation in Kashmir when it comes to the youth and this radicalization? If you're, because you see, we are witnessing a lot of mainstreaming of the youth as well. So, how are these two things, I mean, sitting with each other, next to each other?
Well, these are two parallel developments, but I think we should move beyond the optics. After the abrogation of Article 370, India had the golden opportunity to address these things. But at the same time, the global Islamist entities and Pakistan were also preparing hard. They were working hard to change their strategies and tactics. So at the moment, right now, certainly government has taken some excellent initiatives. They are mainstreaming the youth, and I meet a lot of Kashmiri youngsters, who want to study, who want to, I would say, get to the mainstream, and who also want to work with India. But I guess they've also missed the bus on many counts. There are many opportunities that we have lost, and at the grassroots level, the underneath, these radical groups are making a strong base, and they are penetrating the society. And I think uh, with the abrogation of Article 370, the job actually began. And this whole generation has been born and brought up on the idea of radical ideologies and Islamist militancy since 1992. So it would take at least more than 2 decades to completely change their mindset, or even more than that. So for that, we needed to work on a different plane. I mean, uh, that requires a very, I would say, intelligent and strategically smart political leadership and intelligence structures in the state. You need to completely overhaul the strategies, and also the outreach to the youngsters, to the society, to know what's going on in their mind. The conflict has its own trauma. So you need to talk to people, reach out to people, and weed out the bad elements, because during the times of vulnerabilities, these impressionable young minds are more susceptible to radical Islamist ideologies. So you needed a multi-pronged approach, which required a strong kinetic approach towards these radical groups and terror groups, and also a very strong soft and, I would say, outreach program to the common youngsters. That is somehow missing, and I feel that our political leadership in the state could have been much more visionary, because people have a lot of expectations from Prime Minister Modi ji, and they also have a lot of respect towards Modi ji's government. But yes, certainly we need to do a lot more on this front. I must say that I mean there should be a strong political, I would say, program with a team of very wise and strategically aware and intelligent men to lead this historic mission of changing Jammu and Kashmir.
How is the UT, now it is not a state, of course, how is the UT
Yes.
government measuring up to this task right now? The government led by Omar Abdullah.
Uh, well, I think that it's more or less the same, and things have not changed on the government front. And frankly speaking, see, I don't really expect much from the Omar Abdullah's government because whether we admit it or not, at some stage these elements have been the part of the problem. The mainstream political parties in Kashmir, they have peddled the idea of soft separatism,
Yeah,
and
they are the
the
problem.
I would say yes, yes, so they are the part of the problem, and this whole, I would say this juggernaut of separatism, Islamism, has thrived on the dubious and I would say treacherous political behavior and policies of the mainstream political parties. So I think we have to start thinking beyond Omar Abdullahs and Muftis now. And what is expected, I think the more expectation should be from the center's representative, that is the governor's office in J&K. So on that front, I think, there's still that can be done. There is a lot that needs to be done. And again, you said that, especially what's the situation of the youth. I must tell you that currently the militancy in J&K is in a very different phase. It's a very deep-rooted militancy. On the human front, we are really, missing a lot, because there's a massive decline in the human capabilities of the security forces in J&K, because it's not because they have done any blunder, but it's because Pakistan completely changed the strategies. Between 2016 to 2020, we relied massively on the tech capabilities, and which led to the neutralization of some of the dreaded terrorist commanders in J&K. But after the abrogation of Article 370, Pakistan realized that India can ban these, communication and encryption technologies. So they needed to come out with other methods. So they have come out with technologies like the ultrasets, which are Chinese-made equipments, and they've not been able to crack it yet. No. And then the new crop of militants, which is coming from Pakistan, is highly trained. They are trained by the SSG, and they work in small groups. They are radio silent. They are consolidating themselves in smaller areas. So it's very difficult to engage them in encounters. Even the Kashmiris, the locals who are joining militancy, they are working in a different style. Now they are not declaring themselves, to be joining the groups on social media like what they used to do earlier. Now they are working as hybrid militants, like someone who is working as a doctor or in a coaching institute. He would be given a weapon. He would be assigned a particular task by some handler sitting across the border in Pakistan, and then the person would accomplish the task. He would dispose of the weapon after that, and then he would resume his life as a normal, ordinary citizen. So it's a very deep-rooted militancy, and I guess there are some mistakes on the part of state also, because I see a major crisis in the functioning of the J&K police, because now you have the UT cadre. So we bring officers, young officers from the Azmut cadre to J&K. Now, Kashmir is a very different state. It's a complex state. To understand that state, you need to be there. You need to be on the ground, understand the language, culture, social behavior, and then, when you're working in a counter-insurgency setup, you need to build that rapport and a personal equation with your soldiers, with your police staff, okay, which takes a lot of time. We had older officers in J&K like Mr. S.M. Sahai, like DG Rajendra, and all those fellows. They never went out even on a single deputation from the state, because in Kashmir things change very fast. Within a span of 2 months, 3 months, things change. Now we are bringing young officers, young IPS officers, possibly with 2 to 3 4 4 5 years of experience from other cadres, other states to Jammu and Kashmir. They don't know the language, they don't know the culture, they are completely new to this setting, and for them it's more like an adventure or like a thrill. Even to build that human network, you require, I would say, years of working on the ground, and even to build that working professional relationship with the officers of JKP, they need to work hard. But by the time they are able to do that, they are already transferred, because a person enjoys a 2 to 3 year tenure. So I think we need massive changes in the policing in J&K state if we are to address this new kind of militancy, which is very deep rooted and which is faceless, leaderless, and anonymous.
In fact, we just carried a report in the Sunday Guardian, Abhinav, which said that this particular cell, that module that carried out the Red Fort attack, they have been operating, or rather, they have been acting as a sleeper cell and preparing for almost over a year. So, would you say it is primarily the lack of Humint, meaning human intelligence, that is what is opening up the possibility? I mean, God forbid, I hope not, the potential of such catastrophes happening?
Of course, no, I'll agree with you on that. No, human is one of the most critical component in the intelligence business, and particularly in a place like India, where you have a lot of gray zones, you have shady areas, and there are localities, where it's even difficult for the police to go, unregulated colonies and areas. The human footprint, and your human assets, they have a substantial role to play. And once you have a strong human, you can penetrate, you can infiltrate the organization with your own asset. And now with this new kind of militancy, even human has to be of a very high quality. Unless your asset is in the innermost circle of the policy planning in these groups, he cannot be of any help. He has to be in the innermost circle. So certainly, I think that this group was working for the last 1.5 years. Yes, because it's more than evident. It's not possible to accumulate such huge amounts of explosives in a day or two. If you have to build your networks from Kashmir to the Al Falah University, that requires sustained effort, over at least a year or so. And I would like to add here something, that this nexus of doctors, radicalized doctors, also popped up, a few years back. I'm told by some officers, working with the military intelligence, that this was, and even other agencies also, that even back in 2012, 2013 also, they were getting reports of this nexus of doctors. And I guess, I think in 2018 or between 2018 to 2020 sometime, this Dr. Umar, the mastermind of the Delhi blast, he was under scanner of some of the, either one or at least more than one of the agencies, because of his activities, particularly his separatist leanings and maybe his association with some dubious OGWs. So he was under the scanner. But yes, after that, when people change, people get posted to different areas. So the officers, who might have been handling this particular task, might have got transferred. These things happen. So certainly, I feel that human is one area where we have a major challenge these days in Kashmir.
My last question, do you see Pakistan changing its tactics? And do you see this situation in Kashmir flaring up? And should we be worried and about any such potential attacks happening in the rest of the country again? Because you
Yes.
see, all these days, it was kind of restricted to the valley, and now it is suddenly come out of the valley.
I'll answer your question in two parts. First, Pakistan will never ever change. 1947-48, Pakistan was a smaller country than India. I mean, definitely India had more resources. Pakistan had no claims on Kashmir, but they were the aggressor and they took at least 1/4 of Kashmir. They took away, they conquered it. After that, 1965, they were the aggressors. Again, uh, they were defeated, but then they refused to change. 1971, India created Bangladesh. India supported the Mukti Bahini rebels, and because of the intense agitation and
If I can just mention, because
yeah,
we have to finish also shortly, I'm
yes, yes.
saying that would there be a change in terror tactics by Pakistan? Is
I'm
there a
coming to yes.
possibility?
I'm coming to that. This is just a brief, small background. Okay, after 1971, also they didn't change. Then for the last 30 years, they have been sustaining this very proxy militancy. We have done Uri, we have done Balakot, we have done Operation Sindoor, but they're not changing. In the future, also we must be prepared for more aggressive Pakistan. Now, General Asim Munir is firmly seated in his place. Diplomatically, they are consolidated. They have stronger ties with US, China, and with the West Asia. So on that front, they're secure. So they're going to prop up militancy in Jammu and Kashmir and rest of the India also. And with many new tactics, and one of the latest tactics that I mentioned was that this militancy is going to be leaderless. They will keep the face of the local groups, local organizations, who will be, who will either own up, or at least in the preliminary investigations, this evidence would indicate to the activities handiwork of local organizations, but they would be directed and they would be controlled and supervised by Pakistani elements. And now we should also be prepared for this, this proxy war, this terrorism, to venture beyond Jammu and Kashmir. J&K militancy is in an autopilot mode. Now it's venturing beyond J&K. It's moving into the Indian hinterland. And one most important part is that now Pakistan will be aiding, assisting, and facilitating the work of transnational terror groups like ISKP and Al Qaeda in Indian subcontinent, in rest of the India, because these groups are interested in areas beyond J&K. J&K is a Pakistani turf where you have this trinity of Lashkar, Jaish, HM working well. Now they feel that, that I mean, they need to work in other areas. And right now, there is a strong sweep of radicalization among certain segments, or at least I would say a decent size of the Muslim population in India, because of different reasons. The current communal polarization. They also perceive some of the policies of the government as anti-Muslim, which they are not. But there's a perception which have been spread among the Muslim community by these radical Islamist and terror groups that the government is against you. So this is a very opportune moment to find local recruits and local support system for their terror activities. Pakistan is going to make the best use of it. And I must tell you, with what has happened in Bangladesh, Pakistan is further emboldened. All the Bangladeshi terror groups and the strengthening footprint of Pakistani terror groups in Bangladesh is also going to give a major headache to India in the northeast. The last point that I want to make is that I guess there is no option for India to, other than going for a direct military one-on-one confrontation with Pakistan in the future, if you want to save this country. But most likely, Pakistan will open fronts on the Bangladeshi border also. If this happens, if this confrontation ever comes up, then they are also likely to disturb the Nepalese border also, and the Chicken Neck area and Western Front we already have. And the terrorist cadres which they have consolidated in India, in J&K and in the other parts of the country also. The one which I mentioned recently, just now, those highly SSG trained commando style cadres. While India Pakistan
Yes.
engage in a proper one-on-one confrontation, these terrorist cadres will create sabotage within the country.
Well, that's scary. That's scary. Thank you, Abhinav, for being on the show. Let us see. I mean, I hope the government is taking note of it. Thank you, viewers, for watching. Until the next time.